Hi, thanks for being in a new video. This time I have full review of the Moto G55. Let's start. This device has arrived in Mexico in a single variant, 8GB of RAM with 256GB of storage at a price of 4,999 pesos, which is more or less $245. That is, it competes in the mid-range, we could say entry mid-range. Obviously, it will have good competitors around it. So let's see what Motorola can offer us. Curiously, in this model, we do not find such a wide distribution as it could happen with other Motorola devices. But anyway, I think it could be attractive and interesting for a good number of people. So join me to know it in more depth. Let's start by talking about the design, where I think it's not going to come across as something that appealing or that remarkable. In fact, it has a bit large bezels. Even the top bezel is a bit larger than what we could get. Try to imagine. And you'll see that the bottom bezel is actually even larger. However, the truth is that it's not really something too serious. When it comes to aesthetics, it doesn't look bad, especially when you consider the price at which it is sold. In this particular case, we're going to find a Gorilla Glass 3 protection here on the front. It's not a lot, but it is honest work. On the right side, we will come across the volume buttons, which are interestingly thinner than usual, and the power button, which also functions as a fingerprint reader. On the very top, we are going to find the microphone along with the Dolby Atmos text. Meanwhile, on the left side, there is the tray where you can place a SIM card as well as a micro SD card. By the way, it's worth mentioning that this device has a thickness of about 8.9 millimeters. At the bottom, you will come across the speaker, then the USB-C port, followed by another microphone, and finally, the headphone jack. This is a device that truly feels comfortable when held in the hand. And in this particular case, the back cover features a faux leather finish on the... There is a green edition, similar to the pink edition, while there is also another black edition that features a cover made with a type of acrylic, which is a different material. However, in either situation, I believe the design truly meets and retains the same essence of Motorola devices. With a slight relief towards the camera module, you can immediately recognize it as a Motorola. I think it stands out and is easily distinguishable from many other devices from various other brands. In that regard, I believe it performs quite well. Additionally, we have the IP68 level of resistance against both water and dust. This means that if the device happens to fall into shallow water and you retrieve it swiftly, it has a high likelihood of surviving. However, it's important not to expect it to withstand greater depths or prolonged immersion. Nonetheless, considering its price range, I think it competes remarkably well. Let's discuss the screen, which measures 6.5 inches diagonally. It might seem compact, but due to the bezel size, it's actually a traditionally large device, as is common in today's smartphones. Fortunately, the large screen is complemented by a high resolution, making pixels hard to distinguish. The screen offers full HD resolution, providing a density of 404 pixels per inch. So we are going to observe all the crisply clear text and elements flawlessly through the screen. In this particular case, it is an LCD screen, which is going to provide us with a color saturation that is good enough. The downside of this screen compared to an AMOLED would be that it does not offer us viewing angles that are as nice, and the contrast is not as high. However, fortunately, when it comes to color saturation, it performs fine. Remember, it has two color calibrations in settings. You can choose softer or more vivid colors. However, vivid colors make the screen slightly cool. You can adjust color temperature manually if you want, but for the price, it competes well. I don't think it's the top screen in its category, but it does the job. Where it really has the potential to shine is with the refresh rate, as it offers 120 Hz, allowing for smooth motion display. Personally, I would have preferred a 90 Hz screen with AMOLED technology, but Motorola opted for this higher rate. As for brightness, luckily, we will experience good visibility even in sunlight, making it a display. It has a very bright and the minimum brightness is comfortable enough. Fortunately, it also has the extra dimming options within the accessibility options. So if you could turn the screen brightness down even further and still have a relatively comfortable experience even at night, then it's an interesting screen. And what I like most is that it supports HDR content, something we don't see on devices in the camera category, usually almost always this. The function is available on more expensive devices, indicating it's a high-quality screen even though it's not an AMOLED screen. As for the sound, there is good news because it features stereo sound, which is still uncommon in this range, yet it is of excellent quality. The sound is quite broad, as the complementary speaker, which uses the headset for calls as an audio output, is quite powerful. At the very least, it's significantly more powerful compared to most smartphones within this price range, which might include stereo sound. Therefore, the experience is quite good and positive, especially when considering the sound amplitude. In fact, the sound quality is also quite good, although I personally prefer to tweak the equalization slightly to reduce the mid frequencies. In that regard, the experience is favorable, particularly because you provide us with a 10-band graphic equalizer among all the available options of Dolby Atmos. Therefore, the collaboration that Motorola maintains with Dolby Atmos is evident through multiple software options. These include not just the equalizer, but also various spatial audio functions, unexplained audio, immersive experiences, and similar features. In this regard, the experience is quite satisfactory. However, how about we listen to a brief test? But do keep in mind, it's not quite the same as experiencing it live. When it comes to the headphone experience in this particular case, it still has the headphone jack, which is something that some other manufacturers are beginning to eliminate even in the mid-range devices. So it's still a survivor in this aspect. You can enjoy a good audio experience with no latency issues if you wish to use wired headphones, and you don't need to use the USB-C port for that. However, if you prefer wireless audio, there's also good news, because it supports high-resolution codecs like LHDC in its version 3 and 4, aptX and LDAC. Therefore, it offers extensive support, once more reflecting the collaboration with Dolby Atmos, which truly comes through. So if you own high-resolution headphones, you can enjoy them excellently on this cell phone. Regarding the microphones, we will find 2 units, one at the top and one at the bottom. Let's say these are the essentials, and we don't need more within this price range. Let's conduct a test.
Una prueba. Esta es una prueba de sonido grabada con los micrófonos del Motorola Moto G55.
As you can hear, the voice is captured clearly, and it even offers a feature that uses artificial intelligence to minimize noise during calls. Now, let's try these microphones in a much noisier setting to evaluate their performance.
See that you don't realize, and that's what made me fall in love. 'Cause you got the way your body moves, my heart beats out. It's amazing all the time. You are the only thing I need in life. I want you, can't you see? I want you, I believe, 'cause I want you.
I am surprised that in this case, unlike Motorola's more expensive devices, it is indeed going to have a good microphone gain setting and does not apply any noise cancellation while you are recording a video. So if you're going to be recording at a concert, the sound is picked up in a good way, which is a very good thing because in the price range, other devices may not be able to pick up audio in this way. And finally, in this block regarding vibration, it's as expected in the range, just a simple motor on the Z-axis. So don't expect premium feedback in the hand when you're using the device. Let's talk about the front camera, which is 16 megapixels with f2.2 aperture and fixed focus. I would think that the expected in the range comes in a circular cutout inside the screen and with a centered placement. It should be noted that the camera is 16 megapixels, yet photos default to 4 megapixels because it combines 4 pixels into one to enhance lighting. Typically, manufacturers apply this to rear cameras with high-resolution sensors, but Motorola also uses it on the front camera, resulting in less detail. We'll observe this shortly. Although through the settings you can select a 16 megapixel photo, you'll notice soon that it doesn't make a significant difference. It's quite peculiar the way this front camera behaves. In this scenario, you actually have 2 different methods to swiftly open the camera. You can either double press the power button or even rotate the cell phone twice, and it will access the camera. It doesn't matter if you're responding to a message or if your device has the screen locked, you can always access it quickly with ease. The camera, and that's a very positive experience that, believe me, is not available on many devices. Notice that the camera doesn't have such a good response speed, especially if you're in a backlit environment like I'm in at the moment, but I think that's to be expected in the range. What I find a little odd about Motorola's lately is that in the preview it seems to give odd pigmentation on the lips, but that's a little side note. Notice that the camera provides 2 amplitude levels, and in the lower right corner, you'll find the beauty mode button. It offers a smart setting or allows you to adjust parameters like skin tone, eye size, face size, and nose size. You have many options to modify the face. In this corner, there's a button that preview filters in real time. At the top, find the button to adjust Motorola's color interpretation. It's set to natural, but you can choose automatic for better color interpretation, allowing more capture time. All tests here were in natural mode. By swiping down, we access more menu options like the timer or motion photo capture, a video before your picture, and the full settings list. It has automatic HDR optimizations, and within capture methods, we find the option to capture with a gesture recognition, smile detection, and even the ability to touch any part of the screen to activate the shutter, making photo capture very convenient. Interestingly, the front camera on this device gives us a rather unusual result. Notice that when the photo is taken at 4 megapixels, there is a slight crop in the sensor compared to a photo taken at 16 megapixels. Therefore, it would be more convenient to take photos at 16 megapixels. However, only to avoid any cropping and make sure to take full advantage of the entire image on the sensor. This is important because when it comes to the level of detail, the reality is that it doesn't seem like a 16 megapixel photo. It actually looks like it's still a 4 megapixel photo. I believe this could be a significant point of criticism. Keep in mind that it is a low resolution camera. However, that doesn't necessarily mean the image quality is poor. In fact, the images produced are quite suitable and positive for social media platforms. Colors, I don't think it renders them perfectly, but that's to be expected in the price range. Note that it is a camera that has a good enough level of amplitude, as long as you have your arm well stretched, however. It has fixed focus, so if you wanted to get some detail of your face, it will not be possible. In backlit scenes, note that it is not well optimized, although the result improves after processing, so it has no problems here. At night, pixel fusion helps by capturing light well. Though there's some grain in dark areas, making it not a perfect selfie, the quality is okay. Backlit night selfies are decent, and using the screen as a flash improves detail. The night portrait is acceptable. It is a camera that does not often stand out much. However, it's important to note that the daytime portraits look quite good. The blur and bokeh effect applied in the background is nice, though it might sometimes confuse certain elements. Definitely struggles to keep objects well focused unless they are in your hand or very close to you. As for the rear system, we find a 16mm ultra-wide camera with an f2.2 aperture, featuring autofocus, and in this case, a sensor of 8 megapixels. The simple addition of an ultra-wide camera is a positive because in this price range, other manufacturers incorporate additional marketing cameras that are nothing more than useless. But Motorola does things right. The next camera will be the main 28mm with f-aperture, 1.7 autofocus, optical stabilization, a 50 megapixel sensor, and in this case in automatic mode the photos come out 12 megapixels. But if you want, you can access the settings to choose that you want the photos in high resolution. However, it is generally advisable to leave it in standard mode to benefit from the pixel fusion capabilities, which can enhance lighting, particularly during nighttime. It's important to note that in this scenario, the response speed is somewhat lacking. The interface does not feel as smooth as some other more expensive devices. But within this price range, we cannot be overly demanding. By pressing and holding, we can access a burst mode that's technically infinite but rather slow. In the lower right corner, there is a button to preview various filters and color styles. At the top, we can choose the color rendition for the device. Touching the screen allows us to adjust focus and exposure, and there's also a Pro mode available. In this mode, we can move several parameters manually, such as focus, white balance, shutter speed that could reach up to 32 seconds, an ISO that can reach up to 3200, or also adjust the exposure compensation. And something positive is that it also allows us to take pictures in RAW or also combined RAW with JPG. So it has interesting features at the level of the manual capabilities of the camera. In this case, similar to other higher-priced Motorola models, you'll find a special mode called Scanner for document scanning in collaboration with Adobe Scan, offering excellent technology. The detection is automatic, and you can set the capture to be automatic as well. It applies a filter to optimize the scan's color, and you can continue adding more pages and then export as a PDF, so that's definitely a good thing. Maybe I just wish it would also allow you to add the option of the ultra-wide camera doing a scan, just so you wouldn't have to raise the phone so much. But overall, it's a positive experience, although I must say that it is perceived a little slower than in other Motorola devices. Note that in this case, it takes quite a long time for the automatic capture. However, if you press the shutter, you do not need to wait for it to automatically detect the documents. So overall, the scanner performs really well, And in this price range, I believe you won't find another device with a scanner integrated into the camera of the same quality. It's definitely one of its strong points. When it comes to QR codes, note that the camera itself detects them immediately. You don't need to enter any other mode or anything like that. You simply click on the action and that's it. The ultra-wide camera provides decent quality. While the colors may not be entirely accurate, it still appears to be a satisfactory lens. Notably, it doesn't exhibit significant chromatic aberration or edge distortion, which makes it an ultra-wide camera I generally appreciate. Naturally, the main camera offers much better color accuracy, improved contrast and greater detail. Therefore, in every aspect, it is a superior camera, especially in this particular situation. In outdoor scenes, we see a very good performance. Note that you could also take panoramic shots with the main camera, so you can have an even higher zoom level than the ultra-wide camera in terms of the horizontal axis, while retaining a good level of detail and good color rendition. Note that in this type of scenario, the ultra-wide camera might reveal a bit more chromatic aberration, but it is not as noticeable as other devices that show too much chromatic aberration. Here, it handles it well. Now observe the zoom range starting with the main camera, then 2x zoom, where you see its digital zoom. It doesn't crop on the sensor, showing that while it supports up to 8x zoom, the detail isn't great. In backlit scenes, the preview isn't well optimized, but the outcome is positive for balance of the light and shadow balance with the ultra-wide camera, although the colors look a bit pale. And with the main camera is a positive result both in terms of light and shadow balance and color capture. However, if you try to zoom in 2x, for example, you will notice that the dynamic range is completely lost and the background burns out again. At night, the ultra-wide camera, I think, performs acceptably. Again, there is little contrast, but overall, I think it holds its own. Interestingly, the main camera doesn't improve much over the ultra-wide, mainly due to focus issues. However, using night mode, we notice much better photo quality, so it's recommended. Note that in frames without the light source, photo quality will be poor. With the ultra-wide camera, the main camera does improve, but it's not quite as accurate in terms of color. However, considering the price, we really can't be too demanding. When you activate the night mode, that's when you see significant improvement. We can confirm that it is highly recommended to use this mode. For capturing small objects, the main camera performs exceptionally well. It provides an excellent level of detail, and the photo looks of very good quality. Although you could also opt to use the ultra-wide camera since it has autofocus capabilities, something that is not very common within this price range. Additionally, it has macro capability, allowing you to get even closer to moving scenery. It's important to note that the ultra-wide camera performs quite well as the main camera, especially in environments that are well lit. However, if you find yourself in shadows or in settings where the light source isn't very strong, you'll notice that neither camera captures movement particularly well. The high-resolution mode with the 50-megapixel camera, you will definitely notice that it provides us with a high-resolution picture. However, this doesn't always mean it will have an extreme level of detail, but I do believe it is a picture you could crop while still keeping a decent level of detail. Lastly, it's important to note that for portrait photography, it is not an expert. It will not excel in foreground detection, so many objects might end up being out of focus when they shouldn't be, or even in the scenery. Also, with various levels of depth, you'll notice that some areas ought to be out of focus, yet they aren't completely blurred. So overall, we can say that portrait photography isn't very advanced. As for video recording, it won't be particularly exceptional because it only supports full HD video at a maximum of 60 frames per second for the main camera. However, both the ultra-wide and the front cameras are limited to just 30 frames per second. In the video interface, there's a button to toggle stabilization. With it on, it crops as if zooming in, off, it reverses. The setup is simple, mainly for mic off, and during recording, there's a pause, resume button, a photo button, and another button. We are unable to use this feature to activate the flashlight, which is entirely positive. However, it's worth mentioning that we can't dynamically switch between the ultra-wide camera and the main camera unless we hold the recording. The same action is required to switch to the front camera, indicating that it's not as advanced in these options. When recording video with the ultra-wide camera, it captures in full HD, and here you can observe the result. In my opinion, it looks quite good for its price range, even though it's noticeable that it lacks autofocus. In fact, there are times when it feels a bit strange in terms of movement. However, given the price, we can't be overly demanding, so it's acceptable. The main camera shows a noticeable improvement in image quality, but it does not offer 4K resolution. While we can expect 4 Malawian Kwacha at this price point, it's puzzling because the Moto G55 does have 4K. We don't understand why it's not available on this device. Additionally, it should be noted that it doesn't allow switching between cameras while recording. Then, to apply the zoom, you really need to be directly on the main camera. This is necessary in order to allow you to perform this action, and it will offer us a maximum zoom of 6 times, where the quality still looks good. Regarding the zoom, I think it does a good job of making use of the sensor's capacity. In backlit scenes, it's important to note that the ultra-wide camera suffers quite a lot. It will prioritize the face to illuminate it, so it sacrifices much of the more illuminated areas in the background. We observe it is absolutely not recommended to record in these kinds of conditions using this camera. The same issue occurs with the main camera. You will notice significant overexposure in the brightest areas of the scene. This happens when a face is detected. If the camera stops detecting a face, it will then return to balancing the lighting properly. Unfortunately, in this situation, there is no option available to adjust the exposure settings. Actually, with autofocus, you'll find that the focus can suddenly become a bit confused in these poorly lit situations. If there's no nearby light source, the outcome will be very dark, making it not advisable to use this camera for recording. Indeed, the main camera doesn't significantly improve either. You can still observe that it attempts to reduce as much noise as possible, but this process removes many details. It's unable to properly expose the brightest areas, and there's a considerable amount of noise present. Noise present even with the main camera. So in general, it is not a device that is going to stand out much in video recording. In difficult lighting situations, you need very good lighting for the result to come out well. Regarding the stabilization, note how it looks with stabilization disabled on the Ultra camera. Still becomes acceptable result due to the high level of amplitude. But it is very noticeable movements, especially when you go running, but now, with stabilization on, the result improves, especially with the ultra-wide camera, as it uses the wide angle to hide movements better, making even running look good. The main camera relies on optical stabilization, so walking shows some movement and running shows a lot more. The good news is it has digital stabilization. Then look at the result. Although in this case it applies a significant crop, I think it would be useful for close-up scenes. But if you are running or action scenes, you are likely to notice a lot of compensating movements. So it is not so attractive for this. The focus is going to move well as long as you have good lighting. We had already seen that in some low light scenarios it can suffer a little more than necessary. But if you have a good lighting, it is not so good for this. When there is good lighting, the device performs well and it can even focus at a relatively close distance, so there are no issues here. Additionally, the device includes a fast camera mode that stabilizes after recording. However, it does produce a somewhat strange jelly effect. It's not a perfect stabilization, but it can go from 4 times, which can be useful for capturing movements of people like the ones you are currently watching. Although the maximum in this case is only 32 times, which is really not sufficient at all. If you were aiming to capture some truly spectacular scenery or something similar, the time-lapse feature might not fully meet your expectations. When it comes to slow motion, the results are as expected, with 120 frames per second and decent quality, since the recording doesn't end abruptly, so it's satisfactory. The front camera actually delivers impressive quality when recording video. I believe it doesn't disappoint in this regard, as it also offers good stabilization, although you do need to extend your arm quite a bit for. It's a decent frame rate, but overall I don't feel it's as close as other cameras. When you activate the stabilization, you can definitely record while walking without any fear. Even in backlight situations that aren't overly complex, you'll notice it maintains a good balance of light and shadow, showing good performance. Notice the difference when we deactivate the stabilization. I think you will definitely notice these steps we are taking much more clearly. So it is definitely highly advisable to use the device with stabilization turned on. In that regard, it really stands out significantly. However, when there isn't sufficient lighting, you might notice that more noise could appear and it might lose some definition. Therefore, it's a camera that performs well as long as there is good lighting in the environment. Nonetheless, I believe this is something expected when considering the behavior of devices in this price range. It's important to understand that the performance is largely dependent on the lighting conditions, which is typical for cameras of this category. So, when using it, ensure the lighting is adequate to get the best results from your device. Note the front camera's fast mode with stabilization helps in some scenes. Notably, it includes dual recording mode, though with straight corners. In this price range, we can't be too demanding. Also, stabilization is off, but you can move the floating frame to your desired area. It also allows you to rotate between the cameras, giving more prominence to one or the other. Additionally, it lets you enable autofocus and zoom. However, it does not switch between the ultra-wide camera and the main camera. To do that, you must stop the video recording and start it again. Obviously, here you would benefit from the quality of the main camera. It behaves exactly as we previously observed. In this case, you will have a slightly greater zoom range, but remains as digital zoom. Naturally, you also have the split screen mode, which is available if you prefer both cameras to share equal space on the screen. Additionally, you can utilize both the ultra-wide and the main camera, and you have the option to rotate the scenes. However, It's worth noting that in this split screen mode, the focus is fixed with the ultra-wide camera. Despite this limitation, it still permits a bit of zooming in. Although in this split screen mode, the focus will encounter some issues with the main camera, at least that's what we experienced. We gave it several attempts and eventually it did focus, but it took quite some time. With the ultra-wide camera, we will observe if it performs well. Now let's discuss the software. In this instance, we have Android 14 as its operating system. It may not be the latest, but it's sufficient. It comes with Hello UI, and in this case, the manufacturer provides 2 years of updates. Regarding software, it offers 4 years of security patches, which is reasonable for its price range, ensuring the device's longevity. Now, let me discuss some features the manufacturer includes in their system. Customization depends mainly on Android's updates over time, allowing some lock screen personalization and effects. I believe it includes some quite nice effects, including ones that synchronize with movements you can perform on your phone. Overall, I feel it indeed offers good effects for creating a dynamic and personalized lock screen that suits your preferences. When using visual effects, you might observe that it takes a bit longer to load, so it is not advised because the device isn't particularly powerful. Nonetheless, it offers a great selection of custom and dynamic wallpapers available for download. It's important to mention that these wallpapers feature some simple animations, which might attract certain users. Additionally, we will discover the theme option. In this scenario, we won't encounter themes that are customized to an extreme extent, but rather, you can simply select a different color palette. You may have the ability to slightly alter the shape of the home screen icons and also the shape of the icons of the quick settings are available, but I must emphasize that it is not an extreme level of customization like we might find in other devices. Additionally, we will find the color palette selector for the entire system. In this case, the colors are extracted from the background of your screen. And you can also apply themed icons to tint the icons on your main screen. However, it cannot tint all icons dynamically, so be aware that some will retain their original color. This is why it might seem a bit unusual. Certainly, you have the option to install other significant customization applications. However, at the system level, it lacks a sufficient number of tools to achieve the advanced level of customization that we would prefer. Regarding the lock screen, we can make some changes to the clock styles and include some indicator widgets. Additionally, it's important to note that we will have the ability to choose the shortcuts that appear in the corners. Moreover, we can select the style in which notifications are displayed for the control center. As a user, you also have the option to choose how you want it to appear. By default, it comes in this classic style that merges the notifications with the controls area, and then it is divided into several pages. However, if you prefer a more modern view, you can enable an alternative style. In this style, from the right side, we enter the controls, and from the left side, we access the notifications with the option to switch between pages. In this manner, please note that the controls are displayed in a more simplified and aesthetically pleasing way. However, there might be a slight learning curve to understand the meaning of each icon, as the default setting does not show the text label. Fortunately, to make it easier, you can enable the text labels if you prefer to read what each option means. I appreciate that the manufacturer provides users with the choice to select their preferred method of viewing. To be seen. It's important to note that we will also find the Motorola sidebar, which is something that, for instance, in the Moto G55 is not available, or at least not at the same level as this device. This is because, in this case, it will not just be a shortcut bar, but it will also be a bar that provides us with the ability to open applications in a floating format. In fact, it's showing me right now how to use it, so you can observe how these small windows can be moved throughout the system, including you have the ability to resize them, allowing you to have several things open simultaneously. Actually, in this instance, you can open as many as 5 apps at once in this floating format. This feature provides a great deal of versatility, especially if you want to use multiple things concurrently. I really appreciate that it resizes the content, enabling you to efficiently utilize all the available space. Additionally, in this scenario, both YouTube and Instagram are compatible with this floating mode, so it is definitely quite advanced. In fact, you could also get to minimize all this in these small floating bubbles. There is no doubt that the experience at the software level is very positive. Because in the price range, normally manufacturers are not going to get to offer you such advanced software, with the exception of Samsung, but here Motorola is also doing a good job. However, one thing I don't really like about Motorola is the one-handed mode, which only reduces vertically, but it's not a good thing. It does not reduce horizontally either, making it more complex to access certain elements on the screen. In this scenario, it includes gestures such as taking screenshots by placing 3 fingers on the screen. Personally, this is a gesture I am not fond of. I prefer the swipe gesture, but unfortunately, it is not offered here. And naturally, there are the classic Motorola gestures. I had previously mentioned the one to open the camera and also the gesture to turn on the flashlight. We have this option, and in this particular case, it also includes the quick 2-tap gesture on the back of the device, allowing us to execute the action that we desire. And notice that you could navigate back to the home page, open the voice recorder, take a screenshot, or even open the app of your choice. In this instance, I will simply choose to test entering the main screen. Notice that I gave 2 taps and the device has already responded. It's undoubtedly a comfortable gesture with good utility. We also have gestures like lifting the device to unlock or flipping it to silence. In the Moto app, there are more options I mentioned soon, with quite a bit of Motorola's added software. Also, there's an app called Moto Unplug to disconnect from digital life. You have the ability to mute notifications and even modify the layout of your home screen, allowing you to perceive this in a much simpler and more organized way. This customization lets you tailor your experience by choosing the specific apps you're permitted to use and deciding how they will be arranged and displayed on your screen. Additionally, you have the option to change the wallpaper to your liking. Furthermore, you can select whether you want any contact message or notification to interrupt you, while ensuring that all other interruptions are blocked, providing you with a more focused and personalized user experience. Regarding artificial intelligence, Motorola does not incorporate any features developed in-house, but instead relies on Google. In this instance, we find the Google Assistant, which has evolved into Gemini, allowing you to inquire what you desire via text conversation or activate the conversation mode. However, this is a standard feature across all Android devices, making it not exclusive to Motorola. When it comes to security, this device is equipped with a side fingerprint reader. However, I must mention that I have had to register my finger multiple times because there are instances when it just stops reading my finger correctly. The device allows for a maximum of 5 fingerprint registrations, but if you use all 5, I believe the reader might become somewhat confused. At the moment, I have 3 fingerprints registered, and it seems that the reader's performance has improved slightly. So it's not particularly advanced, apparently. Additionally, you have the option to choose if you want to press the side button or simply rest your finger on it to unlock the device. It also includes facial unlocking, though it operates in only 2 dimensions, so it isn't as advanced as we'd prefer. If security is your main concern, avoid using facial recognition. In this situation, Motorola also provides a Moto Secure app, which offers us additional security options. For instance, we discover the Secure folder, a location where we can enter to store not just multimedia content like photos, videos, and similar items, but we also have the ability to store applications in this area. All of these are protected with an unlock pattern, which can be different from the one on your lock screen. Additionally, in the settings, you have the option to choose whether or not you want to use your fingerprint to access this section. In fact, you have the option to hide the secure folder if you wish to activate covert mode, providing excellent privacy choices. Moreover, we discovered a feature named Automatic Lock. This feature enables your device to automatically relock itself as soon as you exit trusted areas. It's a great security measure. Additionally, if you use a PIN to unlock your screen, you can opt to display this PIN in a scrambled manner. This way, it becomes more difficult for others to figure out how it functions, adding an extra layer of security. Your PIN. It offers options to protect against phishing if someone sends deceptive links. Fortunately, this device can prevent that. I'm not sure how effective it is, but it's there. It also alerts you to issues on public Wi-Fi networks, but unlike Samsung, it lacks a private VPN. It also lacks any collaboration with antivirus software to help protect your device from malware. However, you will notice that it includes Think Shield, which is a development Lenovo initially created for its laptops and business computers. Now, they've extended this feature to Motorola cell phones, providing an additional layer of protection starting from the hardware to help prevent attacks. Finally, in this section, it's important to note that it also includes Family Space. This feature enables you to maintain secure control over your family. In this scenario, you won't just be able to quickly check the location of all your family members, provided they have also set it up with their Motorola devices. But you'll also have specific spaces that act like user profiles. This allows you to safely lend the phone to your child, ensuring a secure experience for them. So, you simply type in their profile using their name, and then you select which applications they are permitted to use. You also have the option to customize their space a little by using different wallpapers. The only drawback here is that you need to activate the permissions manually, which could be a challenge for some users who may not be very advanced. However, once you have configured all the permissions individually, you can begin to log into these profiles. Keep in mind that in this situation, if I'm planning to lend the phone to a child, I have the option to select a session lasting 15 minutes. Once those 50 minutes are up, the phone will immediately lock and it will only allow access to the applications or games that I have pre-approved. Exiting this space is not possible unless, of course, it is verified with a registered fingerprint. Furthermore, it provides the same security options that are available on all other Android devices. In the description, you have a link so you can know them in case you are interested in taking advantage of every aspect of your cell phone. The battery has a capacity of 5000 mAh. It is the standard that is handled almost in all cell phones, and the duration also translates into something very similar. Interestingly, in this case, there was not much difference between my test in the foreground and background. Trying to download as fast as I could the phone, unlike other phones, even the Moto G had a similar battery life. Better behavior during the background test. It seems that it's not very wise to claim that it can somehow manage applications running in the background to prevent excessive energy consumption. So it's best to keep unused apps closed to prevent them from draining your cell phone's battery. However, let's say that the autonomy is quite average. It doesn't particularly stand out as either a positive or negative aspect. Fortunately, we will discover a standard saving mode that can help extend the usage time of your cell phone. Additionally, there's an ultra saving mode which can be particularly useful in emergencies where many more options are restricted. This mode comes into play when your phone is finally out of charge. In this scenario, it supports charging at 30 watts, even though the charger included is 33 watts. It's quite interesting how Motorola does this. However, in the test, it was indeed translated as a fast charge, allowing the phone to recover in just 15 minutes up to the 27% in 30 minutes. In my test, it reached 52% and the full charge finished it in about an hour and a quarter, which for the price range is pretty good. Also, if you are considering whether to buy a Motorola or a Galaxy, for example, Motorola does include the charger, and that is an important benefit today considering what Samsung is doing. In this case, it also includes smart charging so that in case you leave it plugged in all night, the device learns your routine and charges more. Slowly, and with this, you can prevent the battery from deteriorating. What it lacks is a manual charging lock. It only features an automatic lock that activates after being connected for 3 consecutive days. It's unlikely that this will occur, but please avoid leaving it connected continuously to prevent battery damage. Overall, I think the battery doesn't particularly stand out here, but it performs adequately. I did appreciate the fast charging. Let's now talk about connectivity. In this case, it has support for 5G networks. It is something that should be noted because many other manufacturers in this price range sacrifice this level of connectivity. However, it is ready for the future, although at present there is not much difference between 4G and 5G. But either way, I like that it has everything you can put. Where we still do not find the latest is in Wi-Fi, because there is hardly any Wi-Fi 5, but I think it is necessary. While it won't provide extremely fast download speeds or anything similar, it's adequate for most needs. It's important to mention that it lacks a data blocking mode, unlike some other manufacturers who offer this feature. As for Bluetooth connectivity, it supports version 553. Additionally, it includes NFC, allowing you to configure your card for mobile payments. Moreover, it features an FM radio, a capability that's slowly disappearing. In this range, some devices include it, while others don't, which is noteworthy. Requires having headphones connected to function as an antenna. Additionally, you have OTG support to connect various accessories via the USB-C port. In this case, you also have the option for wireless screen projection, both in simple and advanced modes. The simple mode is in a mirror format, meaning that what you see on the cell phone is exactly what appears on the wireless screen. In advanced mode, the Smart Connect function by Motorola comes into play. This is a kind of desktop mode that is commonly seen. In fact, we can indeed emphasize as a positive aspect the fact that it includes a physical proximity sensor. This is noteworthy because many other devices at this price range opt for a virtual sensor instead. If you connect a wireless mouse and a keyboard, you could easily handle some document work or tasks within a web browser, along with similar activities. Therefore, in certain cases involving simple uses, it might even serve as a substitute for a computer. We will also find Android Auto, USB 2.0, and fortunately, if you have physical proximity sensor, in addition to complementary sensors such as gyroscope, orientation sensor, magnetic field sensor, and many others. So the truth is that in this aspect has not made any sacrifice. The whole experience is positive. In fact, we can even highlight as a positive point the fact that it has physical proximity sensor, because many others bet on a virtual sensor at this price. We continue moving forward and we get to the ecosystem, a section where Motorola does not stand out much because although it has some products and accessories that you could connect to the cell phone, they do not really have such an advanced interaction. The good thing about Motorola's ecosystem is that it is an open ecosystem. So, for example, even though Motorola is part of the Lenovo family, it will not work exclusively with Lenovo laptops. That is, if you have a laptop of any other brand, you can also connect it to a Lenovo laptop. Install Smart Connect to wirelessly link your phone to your computer. You can share clipboard, use the phone camera on the computer, and send files easily. It requires some setup, but it's not too hard. This concerns computer interaction, but for Motorola's phone services, no. There is an incredibly advanced experience, and it actually feels quite similar to Google. It relies on multiple technologies and applications developed by Google. You will notice that it doesn't have its own gallery app. Instead, you need to use Google Photos, which is interestingly located within the Google folder. So, if you suddenly can't find where to view your photos, you need to open the Google folder first. Sure, you can rearrange it, but it shows how Motorola relies on Google, which isn't bad as it avoids app duplication. However, if you dislike Google's presence everywhere, you might not enjoy this device. Let's discuss performance, and for that, we'll conduct our traditional test of opening applications. This device is equipped with the Dimensity 7025 processor from MediaTek, a processor we haven't extensively tested before, so we're eager to see what it can offer us. It is also paired with 8 GB of RAM. Let's examine the results. In this case, it took 4.1 seconds to open each application, which isn't bad at all, especially considering that I opened a total of 16 applications. Usually in this price range, I would tend to conduct simpler tests. However, given that it comes equipped with 8 GB of RAM, I was motivated to try out how it performs with numerous applications running simultaneously. Everything seems to suggest that it performs well in such scenarios. Although it is worth noting that we start to observe some application restarts. These restarts don't occur frequently, but you will notice them happening occasionally, just not on a regular basis. In this case, watch this, there's another reboot there, so overall I believe it's a device that will provide a smooth experience. During testing, when opening several apps simultaneously, I noticed some slowness, but it's a scenario you rarely encounter in real life since you typically open apps one by one. Overall, as I mentioned, the performance is good. In applications that require intense graphics processing, such as this particular filter I was testing, you will definitely notice that the device struggles significantly due to its lack of power. However, I must say, it really depends on the complexity of the filters being used. There are other filters that might not be as complex, allowing you to run them more smoothly. In general, it's not an exceptionally powerful device, but it will operate fluidly. For example, with all those applications still running, let's take a look at how it scrolls through various feeds containing different types of multimedia content and notice that generally it remains smooth, without any noticeable freezing at any moment. Let's do the same on Facebook, and once more, I believe the experience is quite positive. I think the device performs excellently. Additionally, the software includes some add-ons that enhance performance. For example, it can learn more or less your pattern of use of your cell phone so that applications run faster by keeping them in cache, and also has the virtual RAM memory that personally I do not consider so useful. But in this case, note that by default is giving 4 additional GB. The truth is not considered to be using them in reality or that they are useful because fortunately it has a good capacity of physical RAM memory. In fact, that is one of its points. Strong. Storage is another strong aspect as it includes 256 GB. In this price range, combining good RAM with ample storage is rare and leads to an excellent experience as the device won't fill up quickly. Also, remember you can add a micro SD card up to a terabyte, making these its most significant strengths. But let's proceed to a real-life test. We are going to edit a video. In this case, we will export it in Full HD. Remember, these are clips that were recorded with this cell phone in Full HD with a total duration of 1 minute. And that's it. It took 18 seconds. I think it performed very well. It is a device that indeed has very good capabilities for the price range in which it competes. Now for games, take note that this device comes with a specific application called Games, where we will be able to explore various content to run. Even when there's no need for an internet connection, or when we are managing the games we have installed, we can actually access the gameplays we've had while playing. However, there are additional tools available in this section. Before we dive in, let me show you that within the settings we have the ability to configure how we want these extra tools to appear during gameplay. As well as customize the color of this toolkit, we have the option to modify the settings of our recordings, deciding if we want to include text for a cleaner interface or not. Additionally, we can adjust the settings of our screen recordings to ensure our gameplays are configured with the highest possible quality. Moreover, we have the ability to block notifications and calls to prevent interruptions, while still allowing certain contacts or repeated calls to come through and interrupt us if necessary. Also, please note that we have the ability to customize which Moto action gestures will be disabled when we set it up. Additionally, we can enable audio enhancements along with some other less attractive options. Now, let's proceed to open a game and observe that once we are inside the game, this button appears. With this button, we can quickly visualize the CPU and RAM consumption we are experiencing. Furthermore, we can also see the current frames per second count, as well as the processor temperature, and also quality, adjust sound and volume. We'll find quick access to block calls, notifications, and improve Wi-Fi latency. Also, shortcuts for apps in floating window mode, and we can add shortcuts for our favorite apps. We also have a quick display of the time and battery status. Additionally, we find options to take screenshots, screen recordings, or edit how these buttons and this panel are arranged. By the way, I almost forgot to mention that you can choose between a battery saver mode, a balanced mode, or a turbo mode, depending on your gamer profile. In Call of Duty, by default, it provides us with average graphic quality at a high rate. It's important to note that you can increase it to a higher quality if you wish. When using high graphic settings with a maximum rate, certain effects become available only in this configuration. Therefore, I believe the compatibility is quite satisfactory. It appears to be a processor that is well suited for this purpose. During the game testing with these graphics settings, it actually provides a decent experience, although the graphics do not consistently maintain 100% stability. It generally runs above 50 frames per second. As a result, the game is quite enjoyable in this configuration. Graphic configuration, although recording the screen, maybe the stability is reduced, and if you can get to notice a little more freezes. So if you are going to record gameplays, it would be advisable to lower the graphic quality, but if you are not going to record your screen, I think you could play with a good quality without having so much heating. So it meets a good level. Then we played Legends, configured with a low graphics detail at 60 frames per second to see what it was capable of, and this is what we got. For the price, we didn't raise it to medium quality, but note that in this setup, it has extra power. It performs well and meets expectations, even reaching 120 frames per second at times. The temperature control remains excellent, making the gaming experience positive. Next, we played SpongeBob SquarePants, which defaults to low resolution and quality, so we kept it that. We increased that configuration and simply increased to 60 frames per second the frequency with the smoothing activated. And just like the first game, we see that in the graph we can appreciate a little bit of fluctuations that goes up and down in terms of frames, but in reality that is not so noticeable because it almost always remains in a high state. The average was 50 frames per second, so it is clear that you will have a smooth experience when playing. And once more, it underscores the impressive temperature control it offers. So, when you adjust the parameters according to its price, the gaming experience turns out to be quite satisfactory. Finally, we tried playing Genshin Impact. By default, it sets the graphic quality to very low. We decided to keep it at that level, but we increased it to 60 frames per second to test its capabilities. In this scenario, I believe it performs within the expectations we might have. After spending some time playing, it was limited to 30 frames per second, possibly to manage its temperature better. However, in this small test, it averaged 38 frames per second. If some minor hitches or stumbles are noticed during this execution, overall, it still offers a very good experience. What really impressed me about this device is how well it manages its temperature. Or perhaps because of the synthetic leather cover, it doesn't feel hot to the touch. However, even with all this content running, it never slowed down during our gameplay. This suggests it manages temperature well, and at its price point, it could be considered a decent gaming device. This is surprising since Motorola typically doesn't target this user demographic. And that was the Moto G. In conclusion, I believe it's a strong contender, and I would argue it's among the most competitive in its category, as it holds its own with a design that is quite acceptable in terms of regarding aesthetics and resistance. There's a good balance, a good screen, very good sound, expected camera experience, and battery. It stands out in performance due to ample RAM, good storage, and a new processor that performs well. If you buy this device, the experience will be positive. We've reached the end of this video. Hope you liked it. Let us know and see you next time.